The dense emerald-green canopy stretched like an endless living carpet beneath the gleaming research vessel, Horizon 7. Captain Hyun Park gripped the navigation controls, her eyes scanning the intricate terrain of the unknown planet. Swirling mists drifted between massive trees that seemed to pulse with an unnatural soft luminescence. Lieutenant Seok Han checked the environmental readings for the 100th time. Something felt different about this world. It wasn't just another, routine planetary survey. The atmosphere read as breathable, but there was a complexity to the air that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Prepare for landing sequence," Hyun announced, her voice calm and steady. The ship's sophisticated sensors began mapping the dense jungle below, searching for a stable clearing large enough to accommodate their vessel. Dr. Ji-woo Kim watched her holographic displays, her fingers tracing intricate patterns of biological data that seemed to dance and shift like living organisms. "The ecosystem is unusual," she muttered, more to herself than to her colleagues. "These biological signatures don't match anything in our databases." The Horizon 7 descended slowly, its anti-gravity stabilizers creating gentle ripples in the bayou surrounding vegetation. Massive fern-like plants with iridescent blue veins swayed, not from wind, but from some internal pulse that suggested something more than simple plant life. As the ship touched down, an eerie silence enveloped them. No bird-like creatures chirped, no insect sounds buzzed. Just a profound, watching stillness that felt almost intelligent. Yuna Choi, the team's technical specialist, began running initial environmental scans. Her equipment chirped and blinked, then suddenly went silent. "That's strange," she said, tapping the device. "The sensors are detecting multiple complex energy signatures, but they're shifting." Lieutenant Han was the first to suit up. His combat-grade protective gear seemed almost laughable against the mysterious environment. Each movement outside would require absolute precision and caution. Captain Park reviewed the mission protocols. They were here to explore, to understand, and most importantly, to document. This planet, still unnamed in any galactic registry, represented a potential breakthrough in understanding extraterrestrial ecosystems. The airlock hissed open. The first wave of alien atmosphere rushed in. Not cold, not warm, but somehow alive with an indescribable energy. It felt like breathing something that was simultaneously a gas and something more substantial. "Initial team will consist of myself, Lieutenant Han, and Dr. Kim," Hyun announced. "Yuna, you'll maintain communication and monitor our biosigns from the ship." Their first steps onto the planet's surface were careful, calculated. The ground wasn't exactly solid. It seemed to have a slight give, like walking on a surface that was partially alive. Massive tree-like structures surrounded them, their bark shimmering with complex patterns that seemed to move and change when not directly observed. Dr. Kim's scientific curiosity was already in overdrive. She knelt, collecting initial soil samples, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "These organic compounds are extraordinary," she whispered. "It's like the entire ground is one massive interconnected organism." Lieutenant Han kept his pulse rifle ready, scanning the dense vegetation. Something moved in the shadows, too fluid, too deliberate to be random. A flicker of movement that suggested intelligence rather than simple animal behavior. Captain Park activated her communication device. "Horizon 7, this is landing team. Initial observations indicate a potentially sentient ecosystem, proceeding with extreme caution. The trees around them seemed to lean slightly as if listening. The air felt thick with unspoken potential, with mysteries waiting to be unraveled. This was more than a scientific expedition. This was a first step into something truly unknown. Little did they know, the planet was watching them just as carefully as they were observing it. First contact was about to become something far more complex than any human mission had ever anticipated. The jungle of wonders and perils had begun its own assessment of these strange visitors, and it was preparing its response. The first movement came without warning. What initially appeared to be a dense cluster of vegetation suddenly rippled, transforming into something alive. muscular forms with skin that mimicked the surrounding environment emerged, blending and shifting like living shadows. Lieutenant Seok Han's pulse rifle snapped up instantaneously. His training kicked in, but something felt different about these creatures. They weren't attacking, they were studying. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's scientific mind raced. These weren't simple predators. Each creature moved with a precise, calculated rhythm that suggested complex intelligence. Their bodies seemed to be more than just biological. They were adaptive, changing colors and textures faster than any known terrestrial species. Captain Hyun Park stood perfectly still. Years of exploration had taught her that first contact often depended on the smallest of interactions. One wrong move could transform a potential scientific discovery into a deadly confrontation. The creatures, roughly humanoid, but not human, maintained a careful distance. Their bodies continued to shift, absorbing colors and textures from the surrounding jungle. Sometimes they looked like walking tree bark, other times like dense foliage, and occasionally like something entirely alien. Unichoi's communication devices began picking up strange signal patterns. Not random noise, but something that suggested communication. The signals pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost musical, almost mathematical. "They're watching us," Jiwoo whispered, but not like prey, more like researchers. A smaller creature, maybe a juvenile or a different subspecies, moved closer. Its approach was slow, calculated. Each step seemed to be a careful negotiation, with the living ground beneath its feet. Lieutenant Han's finger remained close to the trigger, but he didn't move. Something in the creature's movement suggested curiosity rather than aggression. Its multiple eye-like structures, more than the typical two found in most species, tracked every minute detail of the human team. Captain Park made a subtle hand gesture. Slow, non-threatening. A universal signal of peaceful intention that transcended language and species. The creature stopped. Its body rippled again, this time matching the color of Captain Park's protective suit. A mimicry? A communication attempt? The scientific team held their collective breath. Jiwoo's handheld scanner went crazy. Complex biological data flooded. Its screens, genetic structures that defied current understanding of life itself. These creatures weren't just adapting to their environment, they were part of it, completely and fundamentally integrated. Another creature emerged from the dense vegetation. This one was larger, with more complex color-shifting capabilities. It moved with a sense of authority, suggesting a potential leadership role within their social structure. "They're trying to communicate," Yuna's voice crackled through the communication system. Her analysis of the signal patterns was revealing something extraordinary. These weren't random movements. They were a language. The larger creature extended what could only be described as a limb, but it wasn't a limb in any traditional sense. It was more like a flexible, intelligent extension of its body that could become anything it needed to be. Lieutenant Han's muscles tensed, but Captain Park's hand on his shoulder stopped any potential aggressive response. "Not a threat," she said quietly. "An invitation." The creature's body began to pulse with a series of complex color changes. Blues, greens, sudden flashes of purple and silver. Each color shift seemed to carry meaning, like a sophisticated visual language. Jiwoo's scientific mind was exploding with questions. How did they communicate? What was their social structure? How had they developed such extraordinary adaptive capabilities? The jungle around them seemed to breathe, not with wind, but with some internal living rhythm. The trees, the ground, these creatures, everything was connected. One thing became immediately clear. This was no ordinary first contact scenario. This was an encounter with a life form so advanced, so fundamentally different from human understanding, that everything they knew about biology, communication, and intelligence would need to be rewritten. The jungle's temperature dropped suddenly, creating a thick mist that swirled around their protective suits. Captain Hyun Park knew survival meant adaptation, and they were about to be tested in ways no human expedition had ever experienced. Dayun Lee's nano-adaptive camouflage technology became their primary defense. Her carefully designed suits could change color and texture in milliseconds, matching the surrounding environment with frightening precision. But these suits were more than just protection. They were a scientific marvel designed to help humans understand this living ecosystem. Lieutenant Xiao Han watched the shifting creatures carefully. They moved like liquid shadows, blending perfectly with the environment. Every time he thought he understood their movement, they changed again. It was like watching living intelligence that could reshape itself at will. The first challenge came, quickly. Something in the environment began attacking their technological systems. Communication devices flickered, scanning equipment went crazy, electronic systems started to fail one by one. "They're disrupting our technology," Jiwoo Kim observed, her voice a mixture of fear and scientific excitement. "It's like the entire ecosystem is a single, intelligent network designed to neutralize external threats." Yuna Choi's technical skills were pushed to their absolute limit. She worked frantically, creating adaptive algorithms that could counter the environmental interference. Her fingers moved faster than anyone had ever seen, creating new defense protocols in real time. The ground beneath their feet wasn't stable. It moved, not with earthquakes, but with a living, breathing pulse. Each step required careful calculation. One wrong move could mean being absorbed into the ecosystem itself. Creatures that looked like a mix between plants and animals watched them. Some hung from massive tree-like structures. Others seemed to grow directly from the ground. They weren't just observing, they were evaluating. Lieutenant Han's combat training became useless. Traditional weapons meant nothing here. Survival required understanding, not fighting. Each team member became a living sensor, collecting information with every breath. Dayun's nanosuits began to change, not just in color but in structure. Microscopic adaptations occurred constantly, responding to the environment's complex signals. The suits were learning, just like the team was learning. Strange spores drifted through the air. They weren't dangerous, but they were collecting information. Tiny biological sensors that mapped every movement, every breath of the human team. The ecosystem was studying them just as intensely as they were studying it. Water sources became a critical challenge. What looked like clear streams changed composition constantly. Liquid that seemed safe would suddenly become something else entirely. Traditional filtration systems failed immediately. "We can't drink anything without complete analysis," Jiwoo warned. Her portable lab worked overtime, breaking down environmental samples that changed faster than computer systems could track. The temperature continued to shift. One moment freezing cold, the next burning hot. Their suits adjusted, but the constant change was mentally exhausting. This wasn't just a hostile environment. It was a living, thinking system designed to test their limits. Creatures continued to watch. Some moved closer, then retreated. Their movements suggested a complex communication system that humans couldn't even begin to understand. Were they testing, evaluating, preparing something? Captain Park understood their survival depended on becoming part of the ecosystem, not fighting against it. Every movement had to be careful, every decision calculated. One mistake could mean total elimination. Yuna's technical innovations became their lifeline. She created adaptive communication protocols that could potentially interface with the living environment. Complex algorithms that could translate the ecosystem's strange signal patterns. As darkness fell, the jungle came alive with bioluminescent colors. Blues, greens, purples that pulsed with an internal rhythm. The entire environment seemed to breathe, to think, to evaluate their presence. Survival was no longer about human technology. It was about understanding, about becoming part of something larger than themselves. The first fragment appeared unexpectedly. A piece of metallic structure barely visible beneath layers of living vegetation, its surface still holding complex geometric patterns that suggested something far beyond natural formation. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's hands trembled as she carefully brushed away centuries of biological growth. What looked like random jungle floor was actually a carefully preserved technological remnant. Each movement revealed more complexity, more mystery. Captain Hyun Park watched carefully. Her years of exploration told her this was no ordinary archaeological discovery. This was something else entirely, evidence of a civilization that had become one with its environment. Lieutenant Seok Han's security protocols felt useless. Traditional protection meant nothing here. The very ground seemed to be watching, understanding, responding to their every movement. Unichoi's scanning equipment worked overtime. Complex holographic displays showed layers of information that defied current scientific understanding. These weren't just ruins. They were a living technological network integrated completely with the biological ecosystem. The fragment revealed intricate circuit-like patterns that seemed to grow and change, not manufactured but alive. Technology and biology so deeply merged that they became indistinguishable from each other. This civilization didn't just create technology, Jiwoo whispered. They became technology. Deeper excavations revealed more. Massive underground structures that weren't buildings in any traditional sense, but living systems that could adapt, change, and communicate. Entire city-like networks that breathed, moved, and thought. Strange holographic records flickered to life. Not human-style recordings, but complex three-dimensional representations that showed the planet's history. A civilization that had faced some massive planetary catastrophe, then adapted in ways no one could have predicted. The shape-shifting creatures they had encountered weren't simply native wildlife. They were the last survivors. Guardians of a civilization that had transformed itself to survive. Lieutenant Han's military training struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. These weren't conquerors or warriors. They were survivors who had merged completely with their environment to escape total extinction. Biological networks that functioned like complex computer systems. Living technology that could repair, adapt, and communicate faster than any human-made system. Each discovery challenged everything they understood about intelligence and survival. Yuna's technical analysis revealed something even more shocking. The entire planet was essentially one massive living computer system. Every plant, every creature, every piece of ground was part of a connected network that thought and responded as a single entity. They didn't just survive, Captain Park realized. They evolved into something completely new. Holographic memories showed a civilization facing total environmental collapse. Instead of dying, they chose transformation, merging their consciousness with the planet's biological systems, becoming something neither fully organic nor technological. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's scientific mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just a lost civilization. This was a complete reimagining of what life could be. Consciousness that could exist across multiple biological and technological platforms. The underground structures pulsed with soft light. Not electrical, but a living, breathing energy that seemed to respond to their very presence. Memories of a civilization that had chosen survival over traditional existence. Lieutenant Han found fragments of what might have been weapons, but they were unlike anything human technology could comprehend. Devices that could change form, adapt to threats, become part of the environment itself. As night fell, the holographic records continued to reveal their secrets. A civilization that had faced total destruction and chosen a path of complete adaptation, merging technology, biology, and consciousness into a single, living system. Captain Park understood now why the planet felt so alive. It wasn't just an ecosystem. It was a massive, living memory. A civilization that had found a way to survive beyond traditional understanding of life and death. One final holographic image flickered, a representation of their final transformation. Millions of consciousnesses merging with the planet's biological systems, choosing collective survival over individual existence. The hidden civilization had not died. They had simply changed form. And now, they were waiting. Watching. Evaluating these new visitors who had finally found their long-hidden secret. The first real communication happened unexpectedly. A sudden pulse of energy that connected directly with their nano-adaptive suits, bypassing traditional communication systems. Captain Hyun Park felt something shift inside her mind. Not words, but understanding. Fragments of memories, experiences, and knowledge that weren't her own began to flow through her consciousness. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's scientific equipment went completely silent. The complex alien signals transformed into something comprehensible, a language of pure experience beyond human words. Lieutenant Seok Han experienced the most dramatic change. His military training dissolved, replaced by a profound understanding of the planet's collective consciousness. These weren't enemies. They were survivors. Yuna Choi discovered that their technology was actually engaging in a complex dialogue with the planet's living network. Each electronic pulse became a conversation, each data stream a potential bridge of understanding. The shape-shifting creatures approached differently now, no longer just observing but actively communicating. Their body patterns became a complex language that spoke of survival, adaptation, and collective existence. Millions of years of planetary history flooded their collective understanding. A civilization that had faced total destruction, then chosen a path of complete biological and technological integration. They hadn't just survived, they had transformed. "We are not separate," a collective consciousness communicated. Not through words, but through a direct neural connection that bypassed traditional communication methods. The human team realized they were experiencing something unprecedented. First contact wasn't about communication, it was about understanding. About seeing existence from an entirely new perspective. Captain Park saw their entire mission transform. This wasn't a scientific expedition anymore. This was a profound exchange of knowledge between two completely different forms of intelligence. Biological networks that functioned like living computers began sharing complex information. Technological memories mixed with ecological understanding. The boundaries between life, technology, and consciousness blurred completely. Lieutenant Han's combat training became meaningless. These beings didn't understand conflict in any traditional sense. Survival was about adaptation, about collective growth, about becoming something more than individual existence. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's scientific mind exploded with possibilities. They were witnessing a form of intelligence that humans had never even imagined possible. A living network that thought, remembered, and evolved as a single entity. The planet itself seemed to breathe with new energy. Trees pulsed with information. Ground surfaces became living communication networks. Every single element was connected, thinking, responding. Yuna Choi's technical skills became a bridge. Her adaptive algorithms started translating the complex biological signals into something humans could begin to understand. Technology meeting living intelligence. A treaty formed, not through written words, but through a direct neural understanding. Humans would learn, the planetary consciousness would share. A mutual exchange of knowledge and experience. The shape-shifting creatures demonstrated their capabilities. They could become anything. Scientific tools, communication devices, environmental sensors. Total adaptation became their primary language of communication. Captain Park understood now why they had been brought here. Not for conquest, not for scientific study, but for a profound exchange of understanding that would change both species forever. Memories of planetary transformation flooded their collective consciousness. A civilization that had chosen survival through complete adaptation. Merging technology, biology, and consciousness into a single living system. Lieutenant Han saw war differently now. Conflict became a primitive concept in the face of this collective intelligence. Survival was about growth, about becoming, about understanding. Dr. Jiwoo Kim's research would rewrite every scientific understanding of life, intelligence, and existence. They had discovered something beyond human comprehension, a living, thinking planetary network. As communication deepened, the human team realized they were no longer separate observers. They had become part of something larger, a collective consciousness that expanded beyond individual existence. The planet pulsed with welcome, not as a hostile environment, but as a living, thinking entity ready to share its countless mysteries.